freedom. The Peter Schiff Show.
Hello, everybody from New Orleans. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. Taking your calls, 855-4-SCHIFF, 855. Fine, I had it up, but I think I cut it down. But this one guy basically thought I should be in jail, that obviously I got all my money from my connections, that I must have, the only reason I made money is because my parents helped me. I had an in somehow with my father, which of course is not true at all. But basically said I should be tried and imprisoned and then exported, and my money should be taken from me. I mean, this is a serious sight. And then there was another guy that put a comment and that said that the crowd should have escorted me out in the same way that the crowd took Gaddafi out and put me out of my misery. So there actually were people here saying that what the Occupy Wall Street crowd should have done was kill me, right? Kill me. So, I mean, this is the type of discourse that's going on in the United States. Now, most of the critics were not as bad as the people that were saying that I should have been executed. But a lot of people, there's what I tried to get this guy on my show who wrote an article for a newspaper full of Schiff at Occupy Wall Street. Of course, I've used that pun myself in my campaign, but basically accusing me of just telling a bunch of lies while I was down at Occupy Wall Street. I want to actually get the guy on the show. It'd be interesting because I want him to my face, or not actually my face because it's radio, but to my voice, specifically lay out where he believes I was lying or where my facts were not accurate down at Occupy Wall Street. But it's good because it's the discussion down there is generating a lot of buzz on both sides. You have people that are coming to my defense and saying he's right, and you got people saying he's totally wrong. And so there's a lot of people talking about it, which I think is good and I think is going to accomplish a lot more, because a lot of people said, what did you hope to accomplish by going down there and talking to the Occupy Wall Street? Clearly, you know, I'm only talking to a very, very small group of people. It's really hard to accomplish that much. Yeah, I did want to educate them, maybe try to refocus their energies in the proper direction. But even more importantly, it was not reaching the people that were there. It was reaching all the people that can watch the interviews online. That's the point of having the video guys there. So the impact is not just on a small group of people who were gathered around me, but the entire nation, to the extent that they're online and they're looking at this stuff, they can better understand what's going on. They can see the people who are down there, what they're saying, what their grievances are, where they maybe have it wrong, and how they react to somebody like me coming down there and trying to explain capitalism to them. But anyway, when we get back, I'm going to start off. I'm going to be taking your calls at 855-4-SCHIFF, but also we're going to play some of the sound from Anderson Cooper and Michael Moore. It really is some great stuff, so stick around. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. And we are back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. You know, I didn't mention anything about the markets. You know, my quote machine is not working right now. I wonder if that's part of the power outages. There are a lot of other things that are going wrong this morning with the power, but the markets are down quite a bit. I think the Dow's down about 150 points. Gold's down about $25. The dollar index is up by about a full point today. I think the real catalyst was the foolish move overnight by the Bank of Japan. They intervened aggressively. They knocked the Japanese yen down from about, I guess it was around just under 76 to above 78. The Bank of Japan, again, acting foolishly to reduce the wealth and the incomes and the purchasing power of their own citizens. You know, of course, Japan has to import almost 100% of all their raw materials, their energy, their coal, their metals, all the things that they need, they have to import. And by diminishing the value of the yen, they raise the price of those imports for every single man, woman, and child in Japan. This is a foolish thing to do, but of course, a lot of these governments around the world are acting foolishly. They think that their entire economies rest on their ability to sell products to Americans who have absolutely no ability to pay for those products. Again, when they write the history books about this era, that will be the one aspect that nobody will believe. You know, when they say, how could people have been so stupid? You know, no one's going to believe that a world could have believed something so foolish, but yet we did, and almost everybody accepts it as fact. Anyway, also, the debacle debate I wanted to mention before I get to this Michael Moore stuff, MF Global, which is a broker-dealer that is run by Courtesan, who was the former CEO of Goldman Sachs and who until recently was the governor of New Jersey. You know, he lost his reelection campaign, and so his firm is basically bankrupt. It's suspended from trading. The shares are probably going to zero out. I guess they're in talks. There's a sale going on, but you know this. I mean, he's Courtesan basically ran this firm into bankruptcy by making leverage bets. I think it had to do with European debt. Whatever he did, he destroyed all of the equity in his firm, and it's now up for sale. And I guess the shareholders, I don't know if they're going to lose 100%. I don't know what what the sale is going to be worth coming out of bankruptcy, but I don't know if this is the end of the books. But this is what Courtesan decided to do because he was no longer governor of New Jersey, so he went out on his own into the broker-dealer world. Now, fortunately, I guess MF Global is not too big to fail, right? So I guess they're allowed to go bankrupt. We should have done the same thing with these larger firms. I'm sure that we're going to see an orderly liquidation. Somebody's buying them up, whatever's happening, but it's going to work without the U.S. government. Now, I guess if MF Global had been even bigger, had made even bigger bets, then the government would be involved, and there would be some kind of a bailout here for MF Global. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. So let me go to Michael Moore. And, of course, we've invited Michael Moore to be a guest on this show. So far, no luck. We are going to contact Anderson Cooper today to see if Anderson Cooper will be able to get Michael Moore to appear with me on his show. In fact, maybe if you'd like to see that interview, maybe you could send an email over to the Anderson Cooper 360 and say, hey, let's bring this on. Let's bring this match on. But anyway, what are the interesting things, even before I play these clips, because I don't know if we got this on here or not, but whenever Michael Moore is referring to the 1%, he always does it in the third person, they. If the 1% fee, they can do this. We're not going to let the 1% get away with us. They're not going to dictate to us, the 99%. So Michael Moore is constantly putting himself in the same position as the 99% and denying that he's a member of the 1%. Now, I'm looking online. The estimates of Michael Moore's net worth, I guess, go as high as $50 million. I see some places maybe it's $30 million. I mean, even if it's only $20 million, he is way, way, way in the 1%. Where does he think it starts? I think the top 1%, I think in order to be in the top 1%, your annual income has to be over $300,000 or just a little over. I mean, there is no way that his annual income is less than that. I'm sure that it is many, many times that on a bad year. Just in his, residuals or royalties on these documentaries, he's got to be making more than that. And plus, he's accumulated a lot of money. He's got a lawsuit against his distributors for, $20 or $30 million because he claims that they didn't pay him enough for Fahrenheit 9/11. I'm assuming they paid him quite a bit if he's suing for an extra $20 or $30 million. So this is nonsense. He needs to come out of the closet, right? If he wants to have any credibility whatsoever, he's got to acknowledge that he is in the 1%. But anyway, let me play a little bit of the sound. And the sound that we've got right now, before the interview, Michael Moore was talking, and then Anderson Cooper played for Michael Moore a little snippet of the video where I said that government is the problem, not capitalism, that capitalism is the solution. And then here is the immediate reaction from Michael Moore, and you can see this whole thing. I favorited it on my YouTube channel. So if you go to a Schiff report, just look at favorites. You can see the entire interview, not just the clips that we're playing. But anyway, here's cut number one.
What do you think he does not get?
Oh my God! Wow! That's such a huge disconnect. I'm afraid anything I would say would be just too mean. And
I'll tell you, Professor Cornell West said that he needed both to sit down with him over coffee and cognac because it would require that to kind of come to some sort of understanding.
Yes, I think so. I think what Mr. Schiff doesn't understand is that the reason we're not occupying Congress or D.C. right now is because the congressmen and the senators are the employees of Wall Street. They work for Wall Street. They're funded by Wall Street, and they do the bidding of Wall Street and K Street, which is the lobbying arm of Wall Street.
Now, clearly, I understand that. right? Had Michael Moore listened to my to the whole Occupy Wall Street conversation, I was very much against this incestuous relationship between Washington and Wall Street. I want to bring it to an end, but I don't think we're going to bring it to an end by focusing our outrage on the Wall Street part. It's on Congress, because Congress has the power, not Wall Street. Government wields that power. They have the force of law. They own the police. They write the rules and regulation. Wall Street just tries to game them, and they do a pretty good job. But we're not going to solve the problem by focusing on the private sector's ability to try to use government power to its advantage. We've got to focus on the government power. We've got to take that power away so that nobody can try to use it to that advantage. That's what Michael Moore doesn't understand. But at least here, I agree with him in that Wall Street has too much influence. I disagree as to the best way to get rid of that influence. But maybe he hasn't had the time to listen to that. But anyway, it gets a lot better, so let's keep on going here. Here's cut number 2.
That's really where the problem is. It is with capitalism. It is with corporate America. Capitalism right now, and it's important to define a word in its present form. Just like you wouldn't define the word marriage as a woman has to get permission from her father in order to marry. But that was the definition 100 or 200 years ago. So let's not use the old definition when we say capitalism, we're talking about 2011. 2011 capitalism is an evil system set up to benefit the few at the expense of the many. That's what's happened, and that's what people are sick tired of, and which is too bad for the capitalists, because I think a lot of people, perhaps in this crowd, probably used to support the old style of capitalism.
Okay, well, first of all, the old style of capitalism is capitalism. Michael Moore is the one that's changing definitions. He's saying that this new form of capitalism, in which there's all this government intervention, where all this bailouts, all the things that I also am criticizing, Michael Moore is saying that that's the new definition of capitalism. No, it's not. Capitalism hasn't changed. What we have now is not capitalism. That is the problem. What we have now is something different. You could call it crony capitalism, crapitalism, or Mussolini used to call it fascism. There are a lot of things that you can use to describe the current system that we have in America. But the one word that is not applicable is capitalism. And Michael Moore is the one that is changing the definition of the term, not me. Right? I'm in favor of capitalism. I am not in favor of what masquerades as capitalism. Now, in that respect, we have a little bit in common in that we both are against what we currently have. But I'm against what we currently have because it's not capitalism. Michael Moore is against it because he thinks it is capitalism. But who knows what he wants, because he doesn't even know. We're going to continue. You'll hear cut number 3.
System do you want?
They lost them. Well, there's no system right now that exists. We're going to create that system. This movement in the next year or two or few years is going to create a democratic economic system. That's the most important thing. Whatever we come up with, it has to have at its core, the American people are going to be the ones controlling this economy. We're going to have a big say in how this economy is run. That say cannot happen by the people in the penthouse offices on Wall Street. That is over.
Yeah, so, in other words, Anderson Cooper asks Michael Moore, if you don't like capitalism, what kind of system do you want? And he says, well, he's not sure because there's no system that exists right now that would meet to his criteria, that would be acceptable to him and the people in Occupy Wall Street. So Michael Moore wants to take it upon himself to create a brand new economic system. It doesn't even exist yet. And he and these guys that occupied Wall Street are going to force their brand new system on the United States, that this is a revolution, that Michael Moore is now the equivalent of George Washington, like leading this revolutionary battle, and they're going to take this country over and impose on it a brand new economic system that they're still trying to come up with. They're trying to get the bugs out of it. They're working on it now. They're going to let us know when they've recreated this brand new system. Anyway, we got to talk more about this when we get back. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. Waiting the new economic system that Michael Moore is going to come up with that hasn't been invented yet, but he's working on it. And I guess the rest of the kids down there at Occupy Wall Street, I don't know, they're gathering like in a big convention. I guess they're going to have to rewrite the entire Constitution as well as this new economic system that I guess is going to be imposed via a revolution. Well, I don't know. I guess maybe Barack Obama, who's now just, is dictating rules and just enacting things without having to have Congress approve them. Maybe they'll just just decide to adopt by executive order Michael Moore's new vision of the United States of America. I mean, maybe he's going to be the new founding father, right? Maybe we can stick him up on Mount Rushmore. Maybe we can put pictures of him on our money. Of course, the bills are going to have a lot of zeros on them. Well, maybe we can have Michael Moore when we have the first $1 trillion bill. Maybe we can have Michael Moore's image on it. Well, I'm sure he'll find a way to make a buck off of it somehow, because he is probably one of the finest capitalists out there. He really knows how to sell. He's a good marketer. He knows his market. He knows what they want, and he serves it up to them, and he finds a way to make a lot of money. Yet he convinces his audience that he's just as broke as they are, despite the fact that he's making a lot of money off of pandering to the 99%, even though he's got nothing in common with the 99%. Maybe he dresses down to their level when he's among them, but probably it'd be an interesting joke. When he leaves, he gets into maybe he has an old beat up car and he drives it for a little bit. And then when he gets out of range where people can see, then maybe he gets into his Mercedes, or maybe he's got a chauffeur that drives him, and he goes over to, his mansion, and he lives a good life, and just, he just puts on a big act, almost like a superhero. He's got a hidden identity, and he dresses up like he's a member of the 99%. So he can join the protests, and he makes a bunch of money, and then he goes back to his other life in the 1%. But anyway, I've got a few people on hold. Let me go to the phones. First up is Mark, who's calling from Canada, who wants to talk about Michael Moore. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi, Peter. How are you? Hello?
Yes, I'm here.
I just wanted to make a comment on Michael Moore. First off, he may have some good intentions, but he's completely misguiding and misleading. I'm from Toronto, and he paints this picture of Canada. One of his movies, he walked into someone's front door, I believe it was in Windsor, and he acts like, look, everyone in Canada leaves their doors open all day. I'm from Toronto, and believe me, nobody leaves their doors open all day. And he was on CNN that time there with Chris Mortensen, and he was talking about education and how in some countries they pay for you to go to school. In some countries, you want to go to school, it costs zero, he says. You want to be a doctor, it doesn't cost anything. Canada? He said, Canada? I mean, I don't know where he gets this information from, Peter, but it is not funded by the government to go to school here at all. If you want to be a doctor, the only way it's going to be free for you is if somebody's got $80,000 and they tell you you're never going to pay it back. So I just don't know where he gets this stuff from.
Well, I think he makes up a lot of stuff. He's and a lot of the facts he just is going to distort them because he knows what he wants to prove. He has a preconceived conclusion, and so he tries to distort the facts in order to arrive at that conclusion. And his basic problem is that he doesn't understand economics, or if he does, he's keeping his understanding, disguised. He's not letting it out because he doesn't want to acknowledge that. I mean, I think one of the reasons that he denies that he's in the 1% is because he doesn't want to have to defend the fact that he earned his money honestly and that he's entitled to it, because in defending himself, he would also be defending the other members of the 1%. I mean, I agree with him in that there is a small percent of the 1%. You're talking about maybe it's 1% of the 1% who have earned their money as the result of bailouts, cheap money from the Fed, special guarantees, and maybe it's more than 1% of 1%. I don't know. I mean, there is a significant number of people that are benefiting from government largesse, and I'm opposed to that. But the vast majority of the 1% earn their money despite all the roadblocks that the government put in their path, and that's a fact that Michael Moore doesn't want to address.
Yeah, absolutely. He's probably filming his next movie while he's down there at the same time.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe this is all part of another big documentary that he's got up his sleeve. I mean, that's what he does. He produces. He's produced the most successful, financially successful documentaries ever. When he says that he's not a feature producer, that he's just a documentary producer, that's very disingenuous. He is the most successful documentary producer in the world. So, he's certainly making a lot of money. Not that his documentaries are necessarily any good, but there are a lot of people that want to watch them, and they're willing to pay money. And that's what he's doing now. He is cultivating his audience so that the next time he does another documentary, people will be willing to take, $10 of their welfare money or their unemployment checks and go to the theater and watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more thing, Peter, is that on when he was on that same interview there with Piers Morgan asked him, what percentage of blame would you give to the corporations, the government, and the people? He said 100% corporations. Now, I found it kind of funny how later on in that same show, there was a lady in the audience who actually said, she puts a lot of the blame on herself. She was pressured into these mortgages or what have you, and she didn't have her lawyer present, and she didn't look through it with a fine-tooth comb. So I thought that was kind of funny how this guy's coming on there and saying, it's 100% the corporations, and you have American people in the audience, taking some responsibility for themselves, which I thought was...
And of course, the corporations, which corporations is he talking about? And of course, a corporation is just a business entity where it's a form of a business where individuals get together and incorporate. So in corporations, they're not some, extraterrestrial beings that are here. They're Americans. They're Americans who have formed a corporation rather than a partnership or a sole proprietorship. And that's how they've organized, and that's how they're doing business. And they're not evil. Some of the most successful corporations are the ones that have produced the most wealth. They have produced the products and services that we all like. They've created a lot of jobs. They've enriched a lot of people who have invested in their companies. This is crazy to say that corporations are responsible for all the problems. Corporations are responsible for a lot of the successes. A lot of what we have, we owe to the people who have incorporated and used the corporate structure to grow good businesses. The real problem is that government. Now, have some corporations been corrupted by government? Yes, of course they have. And that's because we've created a government with enough power to corrupt. And that is the problem. And Michael Moore just refuses to see that because it's probably bad business. Because if he admits that, then, he's probably not going to sell as many tickets to his, trash capitalism documentaries. But anyway, hey, thanks for your call. Nice to hear people calling from Canada reminding us that capitalism is good and socialism is not. Oftentimes, Canada is being used as an example of why socialism works. Anyway, next up is Michael calling from New Jersey. Michael, welcome to the show.
How's it going, Peter? I'll make a quick comment
good, how are you?
On Mr. Moore. I'm good. And then I'd ask you a quick question. Michael Moore seems to accurately describe symptoms that are wrong with our society, but prescribe false solutions. That's really all I have to say about him. If you look at his movies like Capitalism, Love Story, there's definitely problems in our society, but capitalism isn't the problem, and he blames it all on that. If you look at Bowling for Columbine, there's problems with kids and with prescription drugs, but getting rid of all weapons isn't the solution. But my question was on a completely different topic. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, it's in terms of mortgages and with a possible default of the U.S. currency. If you own, let's say, or owed a $500,000 mortgage, and then the U.S. currency defaulted by 75%, is there
the U.S. currency, you're talking about, the U.S. currency can depreciate. It can't default. The default would mean, let's say the U.S. Treasury decides not to pay the money it owes. That'd be a default. Excuse me?
If they were run on the bonds.
Right. You're saying if the dollar were to lose a lot of value, yes. How does that affect the mortgage market?
No, my implication is that if they were to go to a new currency in the future and the dollar had depreciated by 75%, if the dollar is depreciating and you owe that money, it's actually advantageous to you. But let's say that
Well, I know that. When the government creates inflation to wipe out its own liabilities, it also wipes out everybody's dollar-denominated liabilities. Yes, I mean, inflation is a transfer of wealth from savers to debtors. So if there's a lot of inflation and you have a mortgage, the person who owes the money benefits at the expense of the person who loaned the money. So who are the mortgage lenders? It's the banks, it's the insurance companies, it's the pension funds, and of course it's anybody who owns dollars, because they get wiped out too. It's people who have savings, who have cash value in insurance policies, who have dollar fixed annuities. Yes, there's going to be massive winners and losers, and so people who have mortgage debt will have that debt wiped out if we have enough inflation. That's why I have a mortgage on my house in Connecticut. I have a substantial mortgage that I could easily pay off, but I don't. And the reason I choose not to pay it off is because I'd rather have it inflated away. And the money that I'm not putting into that house now, I'm investing in other things that I think will do very well in an inflationary environment.
So this is the ending part of my question. Is there any possibility that the U.S. government, if we went to a new, let's say, an Amero or a new type of currency, where the currency could be devalued, let's say, 75%, and then they can make it in law that you would have to pay off the old mortgage in a new note?
Well, I don't think we're going to go to a new currency. I think we'll just have the same depreciated currency. But if we were to go to a new currency and the government by law were to rewrite all liabilities in the new currency would take into effect the depreciated value of the old currency. So I think no matter what, if we have a lot of inflation, that it's going to wipe out a lot of mortgage liability in real terms. But just because you end up wiping out your mortgage, I mean, it doesn't mean you're better off. A lot of people will find that they own their homes, but they can't afford to heat them, and so they have to rent out rooms just so they can, afford to put food on the table. You're going to have a lot of poor people who own homes in America. I'd rather have rich people with mortgages than poor people without them, but that's where we're going. Anyway, we'll be right back. This is the Peter Schiff Show here at SchiffRadio.com. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. The number to call, 855-4SCHIFF, if you want to join the program. I want to talk a little bit now about Nancy Pelosi, who was on CNBC the other day speaking with, I think, Maria Bartiromo. And first, she was questioned by Maria about whether or not they were going to have any kind of entitlement cuts as a result of recommendations made by this super committee that was created to look into the budget cuts. And, of course, when Congress creates committees, it's just an excuse to do nothing. Because instead of doing something, they create a committee to look into it. And then, of course, the committee wastes a bunch of taxpayer money. It comes to a conclusion, and then it's universally rejected. Or even if they don't reject the conclusion, they never actually act on it. And it's just a way of sweeping stuff under the rug to pretend they're doing something about it. But really what they're doing is avoiding doing something about it and pretending that they are. But anyway, listen to how she spins this when she's asked a question from Maria Bartiromo. This is cut number 5.
I think we have to keep this at the high ground. Do we want to have effective education for our children so they can reach their fulfillment and we can be competitive through the innovation that begins in the classroom? Do we want to create jobs to keep us number one? Do we want to have a dignified retirement for our seniors? Do we want to have safe, clean neighborhoods and a safe country? Doing it all in a fiscally sound way? Let's deal with that.
Well, I guess then the answer must be no, right? She's basically saying that if we cut entitlements, that must be taking the low ground, right? And she's also basically saying that if we cut entitlements, that we're not going to have job growth, we're not going to have seniors retiring with dignity, that we're not going to have clean, safe neighborhoods. All this stuff is going to happen theoretically if we cut entitlements. And of course she's got it exactly backwards. If we don't make these cuts, then we're not going to have the jobs, then we're not going to have economic growth. Nobody is going to retire with dignity because there's going to be no value left to our money if we refuse to make these cuts. But here's where it really gets interesting, where you can hear Miss Pelosi basically lying, which is, obviously that's what she does. She's in politics after all, and she's a successful politician, so she's obviously a good liar. But here she is with respect to the Obamacare waivers, and listen to how she responds to Maria's questions regarding all the companies that have been granted waivers from Obamacare. Here, cut number 6.
There have been 1,800 waivers granted, 1,800 companies that do not have to be following the laws of this health care legislation. The government has scrapped the long-term care provisions, scrapped the hearing and sight provisions. You've got a McKinsey study out right now saying that 30% of all plan providers will dump their employees onto the public system. What are you going to do about this?
Well, I think that you're seeing the one side of the picture. On the other side, the way we see it is an innovative, prevention-oriented way for businesses to be emancipated from health care cost because they have a way out or whatever works for them.
So what I understand, so this emancipates them, so 1,800 companies are asking for waivers. If the system is so good, why do so many people want out of it? That's the question. I mean, she just refuses to acknowledge that and talks about how great it is and doesn't even address Maria's question. So she persists a little bit. Listen to cut number 7.
But if 1,800 companies got a waiver, I mean, that has to tell you that then it must not be. It's too expensive if 1,800. If you've allowed 1,800 companies to opt out of this plan.
I made a mistake. I meant to go to cut number 6. I skipped out of order. So play number 6.
There have been 1,800 waivers granted, 1,800 companies that do not have to be following the laws of this health care legislation. The government has scrapped the long-term care provisions, scrapped the hearing and sight provisions. You've got a McKinsey study out right now saying that 30% of all plan providers will dump their employees onto the public system. What are you going to do about this?
Well, I think that you're seeing the one side of the picture. On the other side, the way we see it is an innovative, prevention-oriented way for businesses to be emancipated from health care cost because they have a way out or whatever works for them.
Oh, I don't know what. I mean, I just played that thing twice. I don't know what was going on. I meant, I'm looking at these clips here, and I just confused them. So, look, I've got to go to... It is cut numbers. Play cut numbers. That's the same one I played before. So she doesn't answer the question, and this is where Maria, follows up on it. Here, it's cut number 7.
But if 1,800 companies got a waiver, I mean, that has to tell you that then it must not be. It's too expensive if 1,800. If you've allowed 1,800 companies to opt out of this plan.
I couldn't speak to all 1,800 of them, but some of the lists that I have seen have been very, very small companies. They will not have a big impact on the economy of our country. But what is important to note is that we will have lower cost of health care, improved quality, expanded access, and in a way that enables people to change jobs, start a business, be self-employed, to reach their fulfillment and the dynamism that brings to.
Yeah, I guess I'm running out of time. I need to address this point. She's saying they're very tiny, small companies. Well, first of all, I mean, if the tiny companies can't afford it, how are the big companies going to afford it? But they're not tiny companies. I mean, tiny, insignificant companies. What about McDonald's? McDonald's is one of those tiny companies. Pepsi-Cola, that's not too tiny. Dine Equity, the parent of IHOP and Applebee's, the Teamsters, AARP, these aren't tiny companies. And here's an interesting statistic. 20% of all the waivers are in Nancy Pelosi's district. That's of those 1,800, 360 of the waivers were granted to companies in the Congresswoman's own district. Now, think about this. I mean, she's only won, 435th of the districts? I mean, if the waivers were granted in proportion, there would have been about 4 waivers going out of the 1,800. About 4 of them would have been in Nancy Pelosi's district. Instead, it's 360. So obviously she is using her influence in Congress, which is very good. She's no longer the speaker, but she's obviously very influential. And she is using her influence to exempt a disproportionate number of businesses from the plan that she helped pass. What is that saying? And, of course, I'm sure there are a lot of small companies among that list that happen to be in her district. What about all the small companies that are in a congressional district that doesn't have a powerful congressman who can't get them out from under this plan? What are they going to do? They don't have the influence. They're stuck. Anyway, that's it. We got a guest coming up. We will be right back. You're listening to the Peter Schiff Show here at SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. Hour 2 of the show is underway. Joining the discussion now is Chris Mortensen. Chris is the writer and director of a new documentary, Ayn Rand and the Prophecy of Atlas Shrugged. Great timing for that type of a documentary. The prophecies of Atlas Shrugged are actually unfolding before our very eyes as we are living through her novel. Now, Chris Mortensen is a television producer and documentary filmmaker who has many worldwide appearances. In the U.S., his documentary subjects have ranged from Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, Herman Goering, John Paul Jones, to gangsters, the HIV crisis, the Iraq War, professional wrestling, Halle Berry, the Suez Canal. He's got a lot of stuff. His stuff has been on Discover, A&E, the History Channel, ESPN, Fox Sports, BETV, a lot of stuff. I mean, he might be almost as successful as Michael Moore. I don't know. I mean, he might admit to being in the 1%, but he's clearly maybe the polar opposite of Michael Moore. But anyway, Chris, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about Michael Moore on this show. He's been out there. He's pretending he's one of the 99%, and he's got a whole new. And he's on television saying that capitalism is no good, and that he's on the verge of coming up with a brand new economic system that he's thinking up right now. He's putting the finishing touches on it. He's going to dot a few I's, cross some more T's, and then he and the revolution that he's now leading, I guess he's co-opted it, they're going to go through a new revolution, and they're going to force this new Mooreism, I guess, new economic system down the throats of the American public, whether they like it or not.
Well,
anyway, so tell me. Well, I'm trying to come up with a name for it. He hasn't put a name on it yet either.
Yeah. You think he's going to give any of this money away?
Well, sometimes, they say truth is stranger than fiction. Is this an example of that? I mean, is this even more Ayn Randian than Atlas Shrugged?
It's bizarre. It's bizarre. I just wonder if, some of these guys make a lot of money, and then, he's definitely part of the 1% as far as I'm aware, There's films of making. He's made more money than any documentarian in history. Maybe Ken Burns has made as much. I'm not sure. I don't have privy to these guys' bank accounts.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, well, tell me a little bit about your documentary. How long have you been working on it? And give me a little information and where people can see it. Right.
Well, I started it in 2009. It was working on some television docs that weren't they weren't all that interesting to me at the time, and I wanted to I was intrigued by the idea that I was hearing Ayn Rand's name and the name Atlas Shrugged in the news, and I hadn't heard it in years. I'd read a lot of people read Atlas Shrugged or Rand's work when they're in college, and that was I was in college in the early 70s, and that's what happened to me. And I was amazed at the time to find out, it affected me tremendously. I thought it was a wonderful work, and I had never seen it or read anything quite like it. And then but I was amazed to find out that it was considered controversial. And, because there were a lot of to me it was just about as American, to me it was the great American novel, couldn't be any more American than what the values that Rand was talking about. And so, anyway, years later, so all of a sudden now we're hearing Ayn Rand's name in 2008, 2009, and I wonder, well, why is that? Is it what's changed in the American scene? And to me it was obvious. Anyone who's read the book can tell that things are, it's sort of unfolding. The scenario of the book's been unfolding before our eyes. And but what intrigued me about it, you always have, with a doc, you have to have a question, really, that really kind of prompts an investigation. And to me, the big question was, I look back at when she wrote the book. And Ayn Rand wrote the book in the post-war years, in the late 40s, early 50s, a time that we all think is one of the most benign times, at least I always have, the quietest, prosperous time in America. So why would she write this book that had this kind of bleak dystopian outlook? And so my mantra for the doc became, what did Ayn Rand know, and how did she know it? At that time.
Yeah.
And
back then, that's when a lot of the ideology that gave way to the, big welfare state of the 1960s, a lot of that thinking, began during that period of time. And obviously Ayn Rand could see the way the pendulum was swinging and was trying to issue a warning.
Yeah, no, it was just remarkable, the foresight that she had. And she had she once said that if you can identify the dominant philosophy of a society, you can predict its course. And so the question then became, well, what is the dominant philosophy of the United States or America? That and how will that be borne out, over the years? And so an Atlas Shrugged is it. Some people say there's one of our interviewees, I can't remember who it was, said, it takes 50 years for an idea to catch hold, for people to really come around to an idea and to change course based on ideas rather than, the immediate pragmatism of the moment or something.
Yeah, I know. I read that. I think her books, I think Atlas Shrugged sold like 200,000 copies. Yeah, it had its best year ever since the book has been in print.
Well, that was in 2008. It sold 208,000 copies, which is astonishing. In 2009, it sold 500,000. And so this is a book at that point is, 52 years after its publication, selling 500,000 copies. So people were paying attention. People like me who had read the book, were remembering. And people who were hearing about it were looking at it for the first time and going, wow, this is.
How are her other books doing, or Fountainhead, or any of the other books she wrote?
I really don't know. I know the great thing is about Ayn Rand is that her books have always sold, but I think the one that's the most, Fountainhead is about creative freedom, creative expression, and creative freedom. But the one that's the most, prescient is Atlas Shrugged. The one that really, you talk about nationalization of auto companies, seizing banks. We've seen the Mississippi River Bridge collapse up in Minnesota, and it's just really amazing. You see the decline of industry and all the things that were happening in there. It just took a lot longer than she thought.
Yeah, I wonder if some of the people in Washington are looking at her book as a playbook. I'm waiting for them to come out with the Anti-Dog-Eat-Dog Act. Anyway, we'll be back. We'll continue this discussion here on SchiffRadio.com. Don't go away. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. I'm talking to Chris Mortensen, the writer-director of the forthcoming documentary Ayn Rand and the Prophecy of Atlas Shrugged. Chris, a lot of prominent people were influenced by Ayn Rand. Myself included. I read her books even before I read her work. I think it was in high school when I first read Atlas Shrugged,
right.
But it was some time ago. Are you interviewing a lot of these people as part of your documentary?
Well, we're interviewing. We've got a real mix, and we have. Some CEOs in there who have guys like Cliff Asness, who's a big hedge fund manager, and John Allison, a former CEO of BB&T, and other guys who Jim Kiltz, he was the CEO of Nabisco and Gillette and all these other corporations. But then also people who knew Ayn Rand and actually. Her friends and a couple of philosophers, and Christopher Cerf, who's the son of Bennett Cerf, who was the publisher, is in it, and Al Ruddy is semi-hilarious in it. Al Ruddy is the producer of The Godfather and $1 Million Baby, and it was his dream to produce a movie on Atlas Shrugged, and this was back in the 70s, and he had an amazing cast all set up for it, but we talk about in the documentary. We talk about how his dealings with Ayn Rand and what what her demands were for the picture, and how he was pulling his hair out, at one point trying to get it made. And it's kind of a pity.
Yeah, I know. I don't know that.
Huh?
Yeah, I know that they did make the Fountainhead with not Gregory. What's his name?
Gary Cooper.
Blanking on that. Gary
Right.
Cooper, which and so they managed to pull that. Apparently, I think was she unhappy with that one? I think.
With who? With
the
that
Fountainhead
one?
movie.
Yeah, with the funny thing is she wrote the script to that, and she didn't like I guess she didn't like the casting. She didn't like. I thought the casting was great, except Cooper was a little bit old to play Howard Rourke, but Patricia Neal was Dominique.
But who better, right? Sergeant York was a good person to have playing.
Yeah.
He was a quintessential American hero.
Really,
but,
I thought it was wonderful. It's a very strange but wonderful picture, Fountainhead.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, but it would have been great had they made Atlas Shrugged back then at that point. But what did you see that the film that was just released, the part one of the trilogy?
I did see the film, and it was a noble effort. I guess they're talking about coming out with part two. In fact, we talk about that in the documentary as well. The doc is. It's sort of like I call it the biography of an idea and a book. It's not. It includes, about her struggle in writing it and the terrible critical reaction to it. But then the fact that it found an audience and has remained in print ever since, and that people.
Yeah. I know. Did you interview Alan Greenspan?
No, he turned us down. He turned us down. He didn't want to. I think he's been connected with it, and a lot of the people in the objectivist community, that subjectivism is Ayn Rand's the philosophy that she basically started. Think that Alan had a turnabout. That Greenspan, he was one of her loyal subjects, but then I guess somewhere along the line he kind of turned against the ideas. So that's what I've been told.
Well, the minute he got into a position of power, he was immediately corrupted by it. That's basically what happened to Greenspan. Although I think I forget who it was that had asked him. Maybe it was Ron Paul or somebody. If he still stood behind the article that he wrote for Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal about gold and economic freedom, and this is recently, and Alan Greenspan said he wouldn't change a word of it. So apparently he still believes in that philosophy privately, even though publicly it's a totally different story.
Yes, it is. He was very, he was very cordial and said he didn't think it was the right time for him to come back and talk about Ayn Rand again. So don't know what his motives were.
Well, he's done a lot to discredit, capitalism and everything Ayn Rand was about, because he's blaming the crisis that he created on capitalism. He's saying he underestimated the free market. We didn't have a free market thanks to Alan Greenspan. He was setting interest rates, not the free market, and he set them too low. And it should have been obvious to him that he was inflating a bubble. He was doing exactly what the Fed did in the 1920s, and he understood that back in the 1960s when he wrote that piece about gold for Ayn Rand's novel book. And so obviously he understands that it wasn't capitalism that wrecked the U.S. economy. It was Alan Greenspan. It was the Federal Reserve. It was the very entity that he was smart enough to criticize, but then was ultimately in charge of.
Yeah.
And so I think he's done a lot to discredit the cause of liberty and capitalism. And I think Ayn Rand is doing somersaults in her grave as a result.
Yeah, there's a lot of mysteries surrounding this Ayn Rand of the
So what is the release? Is there a theatrical release plan for the documentary, or is it DVDs, or how are you bringing this out?
Well, first of all, it's available. It's available right now. Originally, this was going to be. I figured this would be if there was ever a DVD release, this would be it. And so the idea was to maybe get some limited showing on some sort of television, but this is kind of a special audience, a special project. But what happened was that we started offering it. We have a website. It's called Atlas Shrugged documentary.com, and we have this thing called host a screening, where people can either buy we call it a sneak preview of the documentary. It's the entire documentary, but it doesn't have, later on when we officially open it, it'll have more bells and whistles. It'll have extra interviews, extra features, but we wanted to gauge the reception, so we put out what we call the sneak preview. And anyway, people started buying the thing like crazy, and hosting screenings, contacting us, and people have been hosting screenings all over the world of the doc. They're doing. We've had screenings in San Diego, Tulsa, Oslo, Tel Aviv, Boston, Colorado Springs. There's some others here I can't. But so the reception's been remarkable, and then we've also been contacted just this last week by a distributor who wants us to hold off on putting out the full DVD because they're planning on a 20-city run. I don't know what the cities are because I'm going to talk to the guys later on today. But so we may delay the full DVD for sale on AtlasShruggedDocumentary.com until the theatrical run, and they're talking about doing it in January, which maybe like right after the New Hampshire primary, which would be a good time when people are really paying attention to this sort of thing.
Well, they're definitely paying attention to it, and they're going to be paying attention to it more and more as the U.S. economy continues to decay. I mean, I have no hope that we are recovering. In fact, I think that the government is doing everything it can to worsen the economy, and we are, I believe, in a depression. And the government is going to continue to undermine it with more government solutions to government problems. And I think Ayn Rand's work is going to find a much bigger audience in this environment. Hopefully it finds a big enough audience so that we can overpower the statists who want to fully finish the journey to the road to serfdom. And hopefully we can get enough people. Maybe your film, your documentary can be of some help in making sure that a wider audience understands that it's government, not capitalism, that's to blame, and capitalism, not government, is the solution. But anyway, good luck. Thanks for coming on the show. Everybody else will be back. We have another half hour here on the Peter Schiff Show at SchiffRadio.com, so stick around. It is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. Hey, anyway, over the weekend, the extra publicity, I guess, from the Occupy Wall Street footage helped push both the YouTube subscribers and the Facebook friends above the 50,000 mark. That's the first time we've had over 50,000. And actually, at one point, I checked it the other day, they were both exactly at 50,000. Now they're a little bit higher. So I don't know, maybe the next goal could be 60,000. So if you're not currently friended with Peter Schiff on Facebook or a subscriber to the Schiff Report YouTube channel, why not go and subscribe and then maybe try to get your friends to do likewise and encourage their friends so we can disseminate this information on a broader to a broader audience. Of course, if you're not already a premium member to SchiffRadio.com, why not join that as well? That way you can listen to these broadcasts anytime you want, all the commercials stripped out, save yourself a bunch of time, and contribute a little money towards the cost of producing the Peter Schiff Show. Anyway, let me go now back to the phones. Next up, we've got David calling from Kansas City. David, you're on.
Yeah, hi, Peter. Hey, that's 50,000. I think 13 or 14,000 of that was probably me. I think my wife was about to kick me out of the house because I kept replaying those over. They're endlessly entertaining.
Well, that's not the number of views. That's not the number of views. In fact, I think I just crossed over 10 million views on my YouTube channel. But the 50,000 is the number of individual people who have subscribed. So you only count for one of that. But you might count for quite a bit of the 10 million views.
Hey, I had originally called about Michael Moore. I want to give kudos to Maria Bartiromo for actually asking relevant questions. Finally, I think it was the first time I've ever heard that question asked about waivers. You're
confusing. Not Michael Moore. You're talking about Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. I did call about Michael Moore. What I was going to say about Michael Moore was, not only does he not know what capitalism, he doesn't know what documentaries are. The only way to watch his Academy Award-winning documentary, Fahrenheit 9/11, is to download the 50 untruths of Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11, and you see exactly step by step how he distorts the truth, how he manipulates his gullible and paranoid audience, and he does it intentionally. He knows very well, but the end result is not a documentary. It's an opinion piece. If the Academy Award was anything, wanted to maintain any kind of relevance, they would never have given him. But they can give Pulitzer prizes to people who don't deserve them. They give Nobel prizes to people who don't understand economics. So there's no reason.
Yeah,
that they should give him.
Yeah, Michael Moore's work is more fiction than documentary. I mean, documentary is an attempt to document the truth, or maybe to explain something. He doesn't do that. His stuff is maybe propaganda. It's not an attempt to document anything. It's an attempt to distort the truth and advance his own agenda. And this stuff masquerades as being documentaries. That's not the case. If you want to say it's like it's government propaganda done by Moore.
Yeah, the credo of any documentarian is an attempt to find the truth, not an attempt to twist the facts to their own preconceived ideas. Another thing, I was wondering if you saw this Dylan Radigan. If you do a video search of Dylan Radigan rants, you'll get a kick out of this, because he's one of these guys, and he's interviewed you before, and he pretends like he gets it, like he understands. But I've always suspected that underlying this, he's just another liberal socialist in the media. Well, he goes on this rant about how horrible the Republicans are because they want to, quote, burn it all down, and how the Democrats aren't good enough because they only want to cut $4 trillion, which I don't know where the heck he gets that, because there is no cuts that the Democrats have even suggested. But when he goes into his solution, and this is it. He says he wants to repatriate capital that has left the country, and he wants to use that capital to start an infrastructure bank. And he wants to use the money in that infrastructure bank to dole out loans to small businesses at 2%. That's his solution. So this is the guy who has been on rants about Wall Street and how horrible they are, and how in debt the country is. And that's his solution to this financial crisis that we're in. Somehow gin up more Keynesian spending, increase demand by printing more money. And, there's so many of these guys. Another one is Max Kaiser, this other guy who's interviewed you. They talk in circles, and when you get down to it, you find out that they're just socialists, and they don't like the fact that more people, or some people, have more money than others. That's really what it comes down to. Or actually, what they do is they exploit that fact. They don't really object to it, but they want to exploit it.
Yeah, well, look, there are a lot of people that envy other people, and I don't know that Max Kaiser it would fall in that camp. I don't
Max Kaiser, I saw a clip of him. He said Republicans have a long history of racism, and that they're a racist political party. And that's just the tip of things that he has said to suggest to me that he's nothing but a covert socialist.
Yeah, well, a lot of people, when you talk to a lot of people that say, look, I think, the rich should pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes, and it's always because they claim, well, they have a lot of money, they can afford it. But, if somebody who earns $100,000, he thinks that someone who earns $1 million should pay, a lot of money because they can afford it. Well, the same thing would apply to somebody who only earns $30,000 a year. He might look at the person that earns $100,000 a year the same way. Hey, he doesn't need all that money. He can afford it. He should have to pay more. So everybody's always in favor of taxing the person who makes quite a bit more than they do. But that's the kind of ideology that ultimately leads to the downfall of a society. But you're right. If we're solving the problems means going back to the free market, trying to come up with another government solution, setting up another government entity to give out government-insured, subsidized loans to a particular enterprise is not going to work. We did that with housing. We nearly destroyed the economy in the process. We have to abandon that. We have to let the market function. We have to let the loans go to the people who can repay them. We need to allow competition for capital. We need to fund the best endeavors, the best businesses, those that generate the most wealth and have the greatest chance of success. The only way to do that is to have the market allocate the capital, not have the government dole it out to who the government thinks should get it, because that distorts the market. That leads to a less than optimal use of our resources. We end up putting our resources where they don't belong, and we don't put them where they do belong, and we just dig ourselves into a bigger hole.
Yeah, Peter, did you notice Anderson Cooper's take? Actually, he didn't challenge Cornel West. He challenged you. And then when he interviewed Michael Moore, he did the same thing. He pulled out the velvet glove, and they were actually snickering about, how you didn't get it. Yet he never, it never occurred to him that, Michael Moore was not suggesting any kind of solution. He was just trying to gin up, what I call doing.
Yeah, and the only clip that they played of me to Michael Moore is my defending capitalism. I said capitalism works, not government, and I don't get it. So I don't get it because I believe in capitalism. Yet he doesn't even know what he believes in because he hasn't even invented the system yet. But how can they criticize me for defending capitalism? Our whole country was based on capitalism. Our success is rooted in capitalism, and yet they're jumping on me as being clueless because I claim that I believe in capitalism.
Yeah, it's you got to laugh because otherwise you cry. I mean, there's just no.
All right, well. Hey, thanks for the call. I got a lot of people on hold, so I want to see if I can get everybody in. Next up is Susan calling from St. Louis. Susan, welcome to the show.
Yes, thanks. I've been reading an article by Robert Blumen, and he suggests that if the Fed gets really desperate to create more inflation, one thing they can do is to impose a kind of carry tax on currency and bank deposits. And this way deposits will actually pay a nominal negative interest rate. Which would really...
Well, we already have that. That tax already exists because if you put your money in the bank right now, you're losing value. The inflation rate, even by the government's estimates, is around 4% trailing. So you put your money in the bank, you're losing 4% of it. That's already a tax. I don't know, does he want to impose an even bigger tax than that?
He was suggesting that they would actually impose a fee for you having money in an account so that you would have to pay a certain, percentage.
Bank of America is trying that with, their $5 a month debit card fees. But, banks are...
I was wondering. That's what I was wondering, if that's the beginning of this kind of thing.
Well, look, banks are starting to impose fees because they're losing money. When the government comes in and tries to limit their ability to make money from different ways, they need to go and look for a different way to stay solvent, and so they're going to charge fees. But there already is a negative tax. If the government wanted to say something like, the government is going to impose a tax on any money sitting in the bank, which, of course, would be illegal, but I guess I wouldn't put it past them to try to encourage people not to leave their money in the bank, but to quickly go out and spend it. But spending money is not going to grow this economy. That's the last thing we need. We're going to spend ourselves into a bigger ditch. And you talk about inflation. I just saw a report on the evening news last night. I didn't even realize that. But the price of peanut butter is up about 30 or 40% this year. I mean, peanut butter. That's pretty much a staple in middle-class diets, making their kids' lunches and sending them off to school. And big jumps in the cost of peanut butter. There is a lot of inflation out there. It's only going to get worse. I think anybody who's leaving their money in the bank is already being punished if they're foolish enough to leave it there. People need to do something. Buy gold, buy silver, buy anything, but don't leave your money in fact, if you just put your money into peanut butter last year, you got a 30 or 40% return, tax-free. Anyway, we will be back. You're listening to the Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com. It is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. 855-4-SCHIFF is the number to call. Maybe we have room for one more caller. Not quite sure. But anyway, let me go back to the phones. On hold is Roger calling from Las Vegas. Roger, welcome to the show.
Hey, Peter. I just wanted to correct a common misnomer that somehow hoarding money is bad for society or the economy in general. Because really what you're doing if you hoard money is you're just lowering the price level for everybody else. You're not claiming your claim of national production as GDP. So it's really not bad. In fact, if you look at a real-world example, of this. There's tons of cash out there that foreigners are holding. And as soon as they repatriate that money, you'll see how much inflation actually occurs and how much the price level goes up. It's not going to be pretty.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if somebody earns money and decides not to spend it, then you're not bidding against those people. Think about going to an auction. If you go to an auction and, there are products that you want to buy, and a lot of people decide to hoard their money and not bid for the things that you want, you're going to end up buying more of what you want, or, paying less for the things that you buy. So, yeah, I mean, you're not hurting people by temporarily hoarding your money. Of course, the money you're hoarding, you're going to spend it eventually. You're just spending it in the future rather than in the present. But, of course, if somebody were to earn money and just destroy it, let's just say somebody were to earn $10,000 and then burn it, basically they would have just worked for nothing. It's their loss. Society gains because everybody else now has more stuff because somebody decided not to consume what they were entitled to. But my point when I might critique or say, look, people aren't hoarding money, is that if you want your money to grow, if you can't grow it by hoarding it. If you hoard your money, it'll stay the same. So if you want to increase your wealth, you can't hoard it. If you hoard it, it's not going to grow. So the only way to grow your wealth and to get richer is to invest your money. To loan it to somebody, to use it productively to grow the economy. And that's how everybody benefits by the fact that people aren't spending their money. But I agree with you. Nobody suffers because somebody chooses voluntarily not to take their share out of the economic pot. Because spending your money is when you're grabbing your share. And if you don't take your share, that means there's more for everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about a program for let's say the Federal Reserve to just buy back gold? Because that would not only create inflation, but it would also give the Federal Reserve more gold. So when the actual crisis hits, they'll have a ton of gold instead of just, worthless more dollars, Do you think that would be
well, the Fed is, if the Fed were to go out into the market and start buying up gold, it would drive down the value of the dollar and, so it's not what they're going to do. I mean, if they're going to print money and buy something, it's going to be U.S. Treasuries. Unfortunately for us, that's what they're doing. They're not printing money and buying gold. They're buying government bonds, and that's part of the problem.
But yes,
I mean,
if they were to buy gold, because it would do
no,
what
it's
they
not
want,
going to
create inflation. But at the end of the whole thing, when all the dust settles, they'll have all this gold, and they could still pay for their.
Well, there's only so much they would get because they would drive the price up so high, and then the dollar would fall out of bed. And of course, that's really not their goal. Their goal isn't inflation. Their goal is to prop up the U.S. government, to delay the day of reckoning. The means of doing that is inflation. If they could do it without creating inflation, they would. They know inflation is bad, but they feel that it's the worst of all evils that they can choose from. I think they're wrong. So inflation is the instrument that the Fed is using to accomplish its goal of temporarily propping up the U.S. government and the U.S. economy so more incumbents can get reelected before it ultimately hits the fan. And they're not going to accomplish that if they buy gold. But anyway, I think there's a lot of background noise coming out. Maybe there's a lot of kids in the background. So I think that might be a bit distracting. So let me move on. Hey, thanks for your call. And next up is Nathan calling from California. You're up in, I think, Northern California. I'm going to be in Southern California, coming up in about a week. I'm going to be down there on November 7th and 8th. I'm giving two presentations, two seminars, one in Orange County, one up in L.A. I don't know if you can come down there from Northern California, but anybody who wants to come down, if you want to register for either of these two events, you do so on my website at Europac.net. But, Nathan, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Peter, I'm glad you're coming to California so you can see how close California is to Greece. I'm a car salesman here, and I tell you, some school teachers came in the other day and just grinding the heck out of me on the price of the car, just beating me down like crazy. And one of the things they said was, well, we're just poor school teachers. And I could hardly control my laughter. And so when I go and I fill out the credit application, you know how much the guy makes? $7,000 a month.
Well, I mean,
poor school teacher.
Yeah. So, and what kind of car did he buy?
Well, he bought it. It was about a $35,000 SUV, and
brand new car.
Brand new car. Now, here's the thing. Now they're administrators. Okay, how much teaching of children goes on by administrators?
Yeah. Oh, we have way too many administrators. But did they finance it or pay cash?
Oh, they could have paid cash, but they financed it. I mean, the thing that gets.
I mean, here's the point: if they really are poor, struggling teachers, which clearly they're not, but why are they buying a new car? Why not just buy a used car? And why not, save up? And why buy a car you can't afford if you're struggling to make ends meet? Why do you need a $35,000 loan? Why are you buying a brand new car? You can buy a used car. You don't have to spend that much money. That's part of the problem, that all these people have so much access to cheap credit because the government is so active in the automobile loan market.
Well, exactly. I totally agree with you. But how about, they'd be the first ones to say that, we aren't paying our fair share. And yet they're looting us for $7,000 a month. And that's just one. That wasn't even the spouse's income. Spouse's income was on top of that. Now, that's guaranteed income. And that income comes straight from the taxpayers of the state of California. I can't wait for this economy to crash. I want it to be like Greece so we can flush these arrogant public workers out of the system and we can get back to.
Yeah, well, you're talking about a public school, a public school administrator making $84,000 a year. I'm not sure, what is required, but that's quite a bit higher than the typical income that somebody probably would earn with similar experience in education if they had a job in the private sector. And of course, he's working. California's broke. California's borrowing all this money to pay these salaries. But you're right. It is Greece in the making, and we're going to see what happens if there's a bailout, which means more inflation and moral hazard, or if California will be allowed to default on a lot of these obligations. But either way, there is a day of reckoning coming from California and for the entire country. But anyway, that's it. Thanks for calling, Nathan. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We've come to the end of the show. Tune in again tomorrow. We got another 2 hours coming up of the Peter Schiff Show here on SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio. Bye for now.